if you've been watching the news, then you know that this trade war has really kicked off. It started a couple weeks back when Trump was talking about tariffs and that he was going to levy tariffs on pretty much everyone around the world. And he was really singling out China. So that's what I want to talk about today. This is a continuation of his original trade war when he was first in office. And it's continued, right? He's still going after China. But a lot has changed. And I want to talk about that because China is in a far better position this time around than it was last time. And so I want to talk about a couple things. One, what will be the short-term effects? Two, who will blink first? And then three, what will be the long-term effects of this trade war? So if you've been watching the news, Trump did, some ridiculous amount of tariffs on China. I think it was like 50%, and then China responded, and then Trump went 104%, and China responded, and then it turned out that it was actually like 145% when you add everything in, and then China responded again and said 125% on American imports into China. So that's where we stand right now. This escalation over about 2 weeks. It was really just a couple of days where China vowed not to back down. And they said, we'll fight to the end, which is interesting, but probably the right move, because bullies are bullies. And what we know about bullies is that when you stand up to them, they almost always fold. They gain their power by having people cower before them. And so this was the whole trade war. Trump was saying, 70 plus nations are running to make deals. And it's like, well, many of them, will just roll over and say, what kind of deal? I'd rather just make a deal and move forward with our lives than to be in this tit-for-tat trade war. But China said, no, we're not going to bow to the United States. And so let's talk about the short-term consequences of that. With tariffs being over 100% both ways, I think that trade is going to slow down considerably and almost stop. Who does that hurt in the short term? In the short term, it hurts both countries, but China will feel it first. And the reason that China will feel it first is because they're the ones actually manufacturing the goods. So American importers who are now faced with 145% tariffs means that they have to pay almost, 2.5 times what the product is worth. So if you're importing something that is $10, it's now going to be almost, $30? Something like that, once all the import taxes and everything comes through. So if you're selling something in the United States, your markup probably isn't 145%. Lots of shops do have high markups, but the margin of that is just not profitable anymore. And this is what you can see with all the people that are on the news talking about their small businesses and stuff. And they're saying we import from China and we have margins, but they're not, 145% margins. Many products, maybe a 50% markup, maybe even 100% markup. But when the tariff becomes over 100%, it's just not profitable to import from China. And so the Chinese manufacturing companies, the manufacturers will be hit first because Americans are going to cancel their orders or not order. The second aspect of this is if you do want to remain profitable and you have no other choice but to import from China, then the prices will go up. So the American consumer is going to get hit second. And that will come in the next couple of weeks to months, depending on how long the tariffs stay in place and depending on just how this escalates or de-escalates, depending really on what happens. So Chinese manufacturing will be hit first, American consumers second, and then possibly Chinese consumers. But here's the thing with China. China does not import that much from the United States. Not as much as the United States imports from China. I lived in China for 14 years, and I don't remember buying American products in that 14 years that I was there. So there are some kind of staples that were imported into China, and I probably had American products without necessarily realizing it. And that's pork and soybean. Those types of staples do come in from the United States. But if the prices go up by 125%, they will not affect the Chinese consumer because they'll just switch off of it. They're not dependent on the United States imports the way that the United States is dependent on the Chinese imports. And that's just, you can go around a Chinese home and look to see what's made in America, and you'll find zero products made in America. Maybe some food products in the fridge or from their takeout the night before, but no furniture, no computers, no lights, no electronics, nothing is manufactured in the United States and ends up in a Chinese home. So the Chinese consumer's not going to get hit as hard. The American consumer, though, go into any Walmart and 70-80% of the products are from China. They're manufactured in China and sent to the United States. That is going to be very apparent, and it's going to be very damaging to the U.S. consumer's pocket in the next 2 to 3 months, when whatever stockpile that any of these, Amazon or Walmart or Target or any of these retailers have. And they don't usually have a lot of stockpile because it's not beneficial to them to have warehouses full of cheap jeans or, cheap lamps or cheap whatever coolers that they buy from China. They usually have a pretty good system of ordering that it barely ever stays in their warehouse. So they don't stockpile, which means the amount of pain that's coming to the American consumers is going to come very quickly because Walmart, Target, Amazon is going to run out of products, and then they have to make a decision. And that decision is, do we just discontinue 80% of the store, meaning 80%, 70-80% of the products in Walmart? Do we just say we don't have it anymore? And that's it? Or do they keep buying from China and just mark up the price to a level of, to a very high level? You double or triple the price in order to still make a profit. I think that's the short term. And Walmart and Amazon and all the manufacturers, all the importers in the United States are going to be in this holding pattern where they won't order from China because Trump's policies are changing daily. And a good example of that is just this weekend, I think on Friday, he was announcing that electronics from China will have a lower tariff. I think it came down to like 20% or something, up from 145, because the CEO of Apple went and talked to him and said, hey, look, our iPhones are going to be around $3,000 plus if you import them from China, which they do, and consumers won't be able to buy these products because you can't sell an iPhone at $3,000 in the United States. People won't buy it. It's already expensive at, $1,000, $1,200, $800, depending on the model that you buy. It's already quite pricey. So Trump has already folded on that. And so this is kind of the situation we're in. The short-term situation is it's pretty uncertain. The Chinese importers will just find other places to import from. And this is what I meant when I started saying that China's in a better place. When Trump first was in office and the trade war kicked off in 2000, I think it was 17, 18, around that time when he really started to put tariffs on China, they were importing a lot of pork and a lot of soybeans and a lot of other products from the United States. And it did hurt them because they couldn't import them at the same price, essentially. But instead of complaining and fighting and making a big fuss about it, they diversified their supply chain, basically, and they went to Brazil and they said, we'll buy soybeans from Brazil. They went to other parts of the world and said, where can we grow soybeans? Where can we find the product that we want without tariffs in another country. And this is what I kind of want to talk about in terms of the long term. China is currently exporting around 15% of to the United States. Now, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's not a small amount. But is it so much that you're going to have a bunch of factories shut down and that you're going to have widespread panic and that you're going to have widespread unemployment? The truth is, not really. Some manufacturers will be shut down. That's inevitable. Because if your main supplier is Walmart and is the United States, if that's where you're sending your manufacturing to, and that's shut off, and you don't have any other supply chains to, Southeast Asia or to Africa or South America or Europe or anywhere else, then yeah, your revenue is going to be shut off, and you're going to have to adapt or go out of business. There will be some manufacturers in China that go out of business. How many? It's unclear at this point. So when we look at what China exports, we can see that about 85% of their exports goes to the rest of the world, not the United States. So manufacturers will feel some pain. Some will close. But for the vast majority of it, it's not making up their profit anyways. It's not making up their major component of their manufacturing. So long term, these manufacturers in China will have to find even more diversified, markets. They'll have to go into other markets that maybe they didn't explore previously because they weren't sure if it was profitable or because they didn't have contacts. And this is what happened in 2017-18 when the first trade war happened. The Chinese government and the Chinese manufacturers realized that they needed to diversify away from the United States. And that's what they did. And so I see that will continue. And the long-term effect of that is the Chinese economy will be stronger long-term because they'll be less reliant on the United States. Whereas the United States is in a different situation. So Trump has said long-term manufacturing jobs will come back to the United States, and I just don't see that happening. I do not see that happening because it's still cost prohibitive. The labor force in the United States is still demanding too much for what would be needed. Like the jobs would still be priced too high to keep the goods as low as you can get them from other parts of the world. So manufacturing will shift to other parts of the world. It won't come back to the United States. And a lot of people have said, oh, well, automation in the factories in the United States will be automated. And therefore, we don't have to worry about the cost of labor because it'll all be automated. And to that point, I say, if it is profitable, if it is cost effective, why haven't they already done it? If they're saying it is cost effective, then why hasn't Nike, why hasn't Apple, why hasn't every big manufacturer, big American manufacturer, why haven't they already done that? Why haven't they already reshored to the United States if it's so easy to do and if it's profitable? And the reason is it's not. Because businesses are in the business of maximizing profit. And so if it was profitable to bring that manufacturing back to the United States, they would have already done it. And they haven't. So this idea that it will somehow become profitable now doesn't hold any water because businesses look for opportunities to maximize profit. And they haven't been reshoring to the United States. So long term, I think China will be in a much better position. And that will be because they continue to diversify into other markets. If you look at the global kind of map of trade, China is already the dominant trading partner with most of the world. And so I can see that continuing. And the United States will shrink in terms of the overall exports from China, because China will just shift off to other nations and other regional places like Europe. And we see that now Europe is potentially going to renegotiate some of the deals with China. We had the Spanish Prime Minister in Beijing just a couple days ago trying to, I guess, figure out what's going on and hopefully create more, bilateral trade between Spain and China. It was one of those meetings where he went to see what's going on and see how this is going to play out. The United States has also created a situation that less and less countries are going to trust the United States because of its erratic behavior, right? Markets like predictability, and Trump is changing his mind every day. And so they will move to more stable trading partners. And China has handled this pretty well so far. They haven't overreacted. Even when they did put the 125% tariffs on American goods, they basically were like, that's it. What's the point of going any farther? It's childish and silly to just keep increasing the number, And I thought that was a pretty smart play because it made them look like the responsible economists, and where they're saying, like, what's the point? It could be 200, it could be 300, whatever. If Trump wants to keep raising the number, let him raise it, because effectively after it becomes 100%, you've doubled the price of everything, and the chance of keeping that profitable is very low. And so they were basically like, whatever, it's silly. Sure, 125%, but that's it. We're not going to raise it anymore. And that signals that they are more responsible in my mind, because they're not trying to, tit for tat, where it seems like childish, like, playground antics where, well, I dare you. Well, I double dare you. Oh, I triple dog dare you. Oh, I triple dog mama whatever dare you. It's like, whatever. It's childish. That's basically what they were saying to the world. It's like, Trump is childish and he's silly. So we're not going to play this game. 125, we're done. Just so that it's somewhat in line with what the United States was doing. But I think that was a good move. The next big issue is who's going to blink. Will it be President Xi who picks up the phone and calls Trump, or is it going to be Trump that calls President Xi? And I would bet money, if I was a betting person, that it definitely won't be Xi that picks up the phone, but it will be, if the Trump administration is smart, it will be a series of conversations that allow both parties to save face. And that by the time that meeting happens between President Xi and President Trump, neither of them look like they made the phone call. My issue is I don't think the Americans are smart enough to understand how communication works in China, that they aren't going to go through the proper channels in order to get that high-level meeting, which means they've basically put the two leaders at odds. And President Xi has made his point in saying, we don't need the United States, we're going to fight to the end. And Trump has basically said, President Xi has to come bow down to me if he wants to make a deal, but he doesn't know how to make a deal, so he's incompetent, which is not the case at all. I think Trump will fold first, and how he does that we'll see. This could be a PR play. Whichever one essentially folds first could spin the narrative in their favor. Trump could say, look, China's unreasonable, but I'm willing to make a deal, so I called him and I was the bigger person. And they could spin it that way, saying Trump is a great negotiator. He's being the responsible adult by making the phone call. That could play out poorly for President Xi, but I think his domestic audience is more important. And the Chinese people don't want him to make that phone call to make him look weak. Because if he makes the phone call, then the narrative from the United States is, look, he came begging for us because his economy is collapsing. Regardless of if it's true, that's how they'll portray it. The only way they save face is if they actually communicate the way Chinese communicate. And like I said, I lived there for 14 years. And the way it works is very simple. One low-level manager talks to another low-level manager, and then they come to some sort of agreement. They present to both their bosses, and if both the bosses agree, then they meet. So it's a higher-level boss meets, and they come together and say, this is what was already agreed upon, and this is what we would like to add. And they say, okay, if they agree to that, then it gets kicked up. It goes from the bottom up, so that when President Xi and when President Trump actually meet, there are no surprises. And it essentially is PR and formalities, where the deal has already been settled, weeks ago, and both parties are fully on board and they both know what has been agreed upon. And so that the two big bosses, the two big presidents, can come together, shake hands, and say, we've made this great deal, and there are no surprises, because that's how communication works in China. It starts at the bottom and it works its way up to the top. And at every level, it gets approval. And at every level, it goes up the chain, down the chain, up the chain, down the chain, up the chain, down the chain. And so that when it finally makes it to the top, it's agreed upon. The big bosses aren't even having a negotiation half the time. It's more they're shaking hands and saying, we've agreed on this. This company has agreed with your company to go forward with this deal or whatever it is that they're negotiating. And the big bosses never actually have to lose face, because what they do is they take credit for the deal that has already happened at all the levels below them. And so the big bosses look good. There's no surprises. Everybody's happy. If Trump does that, if they actually go through the right levels of communication, then Trump and Xi could have a meeting. And if Trump just keeps his mouth shut and doesn't try and do anything crazy like he did with Zelensky, and start yelling at Xi or acting crazy, they could save face. They could have some sort of deal that would benefit both countries. At this point, any kind of deal would probably benefit both countries. I don't think Trump would get what he wants, because I don't think China is in the same position they were in 2017-18 when the first trade war kicked off. And I don't think that they believe that they need to bow to the United States. They feel that they've hit a point in their development that they can stand up. And the reason we see that is because they literally said they were going to fight till the end, and said, whether a trade war or a real war, we're ready. And that's pretty big. Basically, where do you go from that? Right? You're saying we're gonna fight. So I think Trump will back down. The way he does it, he'll attempt to spin it to say that he's somehow the bigger person. His little army of cultists will say, oh, it's the art of the deal, and be like, I think he just folded, like he's done every time. And I think China has enough leeway to hold for him to cave, if that makes sense. Like, they can wait it out, I think, much longer than Trump can wait it out, because the United States is more reliant on China for imports than the other way around. Also, China and the Chinese government is fully in control. So even if the people are suffering, they can either provide subsidize some of the manufacturing, or they can just tell them that it's for the good of the nation and they have to suck it up. As for the Americans, they can vote in 2 years in the midterms, which would change the dynamic within the Senate and in the Congress. And so in the government, it can be changed. And as for the consumers in the United States, they can really go out and protest when the prices hit their stores and they're saying, why is everything doubled? Trump said he was going to bring the prices down, and now everything is tripled, doubled and tripled and increased by 70-80%, and I can't afford anything anymore. They can go out and protest on the streets, whereas in China, it's a little bit more difficult for them to do that. So I think we'll see the U.S. fold. And I think China's calculated enough to say that we could at least last 2 to 3 years until the administration changes again. And all the while looking for other partners, whether it's Japan and Korea or India or anywhere else that they could create a stronger alliance around China and say, look, the United States is irrational and crazy, so come be with us and we'll treat you more fairly, at least for now. Who knows in the future? I mean, obviously the United States was the stable economic power, and now things change. So things can change quickly. It's very interesting. I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts in the comments. Because, yeah, I do think that long-term China will come out a bit stronger. Short-term, they'll feel the pain. Long-term, I think they'll be more diversified and better off. Short-term, I think the U.S. is going to feel the pain. And long-term, I think the U.S. is going to feel the pain because I don't think manufacturing will come back to the United States. Basically, because it's too expensive for automation or for just regular, labor. So it's really interesting. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Am I crazy, ranting for 20, 30 minutes, or am I correct? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.